King Herod the Great has been diagnosed posthumously as a manic depressive, paranoid schizophrenic with aggressive tendencies. Of all the kings, potentates, and despots to have ruled over the Israelites, Herod uniquely lives in infamy. His dubious character begins when his father Antipater, friend of Hyrcanus II and lackey of the Romans, gets him appointed governor of Galilee. But all is not well in this region to the north. The Zealot party that happens to be headquartered in Galilee has quickly morphed into a serious revolutionary movement. In Herod's new capacity as governor, he has the ringleader of these anti-Roman freedom fighters, Hezekiah the Galilean, brutally slain. Unfortunately for him, the Sanhedrin, far from disappearing, continues as the judicial branch of government, even under the Romans. Herod is hauled before the august body and convicted of murder. Fleeing for his life to Rome, he uses his considerable political acumen to convince his pals, Octavian and Mark Antony, to appoint him king of Judea. Now, Judea in these days is actually a drain on the resources of Rome. It's far removed from the seat of power, and therefore difficult and expensive to send the necessary troops and civil servants to govern it. Herod is known in Rome to be incompetent, and his posting in this insignificant scrap of desert may well be regarded as a way simply to be rid of him. The gist of the directive from the Roman leaders: "We have made you king, now go conquer your kingdom." Returning to Jerusalem with a Roman legion in tow, Herod does just that. After incredible carnage and bloodletting, the new king reigns supreme. He will never, however, be accepted by the people he rules. For one thing, he isn't even Jewish. His father is an Idumean and governor of that nearby province situated southeast of Judea under the Hasmonean dynasty. Not surprisingly, Herod is viewed as a usurper of monstrous proportions. He will therefore go to great lengths to justify his regime and gain legitimacy in the eyes of the Judeans. This will unleash his manic side as he builds palaces of grandeur from the desert dust. In his depressive state, his cruelty will know no bounds. Josephus, the ancient historian, writes in detail of the state tyranny of King Herod the Great. Specifically, he notes, "When he took the kingdom, though it was in an extraordinary flourishing condition, he had filled the nation with the utmost degree of poverty. And when, upon unjust pretenses, he had killed any of the nobility, he took away their estates. And when he permitted any of them to live, he condemned them to the forfeiture of what they possessed. And beside the annual impositions which he laid upon every one of them, they were to make liberal presents to himself, to his servants and friends, and to such of his slaves as were promised the favor of being his tax gatherers. because there was no way of obtaining freedom from unjust violence without giving either gold or silver for it. Herod had put such abuses upon them as a wild beast would not have put on them if he had power given to rule over us, and that although their nation had passed through many subversions and alterations of government, their history gave no account of any calamity they had ever been under that could be compared with this which Herod brought upon their nation. In the case of Herod, the tyrant still tries to please his subject Israelites in a manner evocative of how despotic regimes have always tried to ensnare and entrap their populations, passing out benefits in the form of massive public works projects. On the Mediterranean coast, he builds a spectacular new port city, Caesarea or Caesarea, to this day considered a masterpiece of engineering. The massive artificial harbor employs the Romans' breakthrough construction technique of underwater concrete. It boasts of a Hellenistic-style theater of perfect acoustics facing the ocean, a great hippodrome where chariot races are conducted, an underground sewer system periodically flushed by the tides, and an elaborate aqueduct channeling a torrent of water from the distant hills. Its centerpiece is an enormous temple to the Emperor Augustus, visible far out to sea. But who cares about these trappings of high civilization when the people are continually oppressed by a usurper king? Back in Jerusalem, the temple built in the days of Ezra needs a facelift. But a facelift won't be enough. Herod will launch his greatest public works project of all, completely remaking not just the temple, but the very hill on which it stands. It remains the largest human-made platform on Earth, nearly 500 meters by 300 meters in area. It's the rough equivalent of 24 football fields, eclipsing in sheer area even the pyramids of Egypt. It essentially squares off a sloping hillside by means of a vast network of subterranean vaults supported by rows of arches in 4 levels, each vaulted room being 20 feet tall by 20 feet wide. As for the temple itself, it's gone today, replaced by the Muslim shrine known as the Dome of the Rock. But words cannot describe its grandeur in Herod's day. Topped by castings of solid gold, its white marble gleaming in the Judean sun, it's the physical emblem of Herod's mega-state. But is it really necessary to have such a colossus in the heart of Jerusalem? Or is it really just an ancient bridge to nowhere? Moreover, even this gargantuan monument will not satisfy a populace that much prefers self-determination to grandiosity. If Solomon's temple might in retrospect be considered a boondoggle, this beautiful monstrosity bearing an idolatrous Roman eagle at its pinnacle perfectly epitomizes the new tyranny. In the Judean countryside, the Pharisees are still around and more active than ever. Some dream of redemption from the yoke of oppression, both foreign, Rome, and domestic, Herod, becoming at least comrades, if not comrades in arms, of the growing zealot movement. Others, however, counsel patience and trust in the coming of a peaceful, not militant Messiah. They believe that for those who take upon themselves the yoke of the Torah, the yoke of Rome will fall off of its own accord. To this end, they have put in place a vibrant, lively infrastructure whose dual aims are to encourage the people of the land, in Hebrew, Am Haaretz, to be observant of their religious obligations, and to provide comfort and care for the neediest of the people. In a kindred current with the Pharisees is a popular Galilean teacher-prophet who comes along in the days of the Emperor Tiberius, after Herod has died and been replaced in Judea by a series of Roman governors or procurators. His name is Yeshua, though sacred tradition knows him as Jesus of Nazareth. The one thing we know with certainty about Yeshua is that we know very little with certainty. As Thomas Jefferson wrote, rogueries, absurdities, and untruths were perpetuated upon the teachings of Jesus by a large band of dupes. Just about everybody wants to lay claim to Jesus as one of us, so that most of what is thought common knowledge with respect to him amounts to anachronistic stereotype. That, commingled with religious doctrine and dogma, leaves us scratching our heads, scrambling to uncover anything of the real Jesus. Some scholars see him as a pacifistic Pharisee, aware of the rumbles of anti-Roman sentiment, yet counseling a non-violent approach focused on social justice. Others see him not as Jesus the Jewish socialist, but as Jesus the zealot patriot, an insurrectionist in his own right, in league with the Galilean zealot movement. Interestingly, there's additional evidence in the Gospels themselves for the latter interpretation. After all, when he's tried before the procurator, Pontius Pilate, leading up to his crucifixion, we are told that his opponents began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be the Christ or Messiah, a king." And who are these opponents? Doubtless, the Sadducean priesthood, ever at odds with the Pharisees and ready to repeat to the authorities the incriminating rumors that have spread throughout the land. The budding revolution is preceded by decades of unrest. Well before Jesus' public teaching, in the year 5 of the Common Era, a census tax, seen as a sign of Roman enslavement, has provoked riots and mass uprising. In the lead is Judah of Galilee, son of Hezekiah, described by Josephus as having an inviolable attachment to liberty, joined by one of the Pharisee leaders named Tzadok. The revolt is put down, only with great difficulty and over several decades. The worst, however, is yet to come. In the year 46 CE, 2 of Judah's sons are, like Jesus, crucified as tax insurrectionists. According to Josephus, a third son, Menachem, will live to fight the Romans again during the great Jewish revolt that breaks out in the year 66 CE. Who can blame ancient Israel's patriots or their quasi-democratic Sanhedrin for simply wanting to be free from Rome's mad emperor, the despotic Nero Caesar? What they lack, however, is a George Washington-type leader who can galvanize and integrate the rebel cause. Instead, the military commander of the seedbed of the resistance movement, Galilee, turns out to be Israel's version of Benedict Arnold, Josephus Flavius. "I am a priest from Jerusalem, the son of an aristocratic woman of Hasmonean stock. On my father's side, I am the descendant of the first Hasmonean high priest, Jonathan, who, as we recall, had usurped the office. Drafted into service by an assembly in the temple, likely the Sanhedrin, I have had misgivings about the hopeless cause of the rebels from the outset. After the outbreak of revolt, when the Roman garrisons were expelled from Caesarea, Jerusalem, and the rocky fortress in the Judean desert, Masada, Nero's counter-offensive would only be a matter of time. He dispatched his best generals, Vespasian and his son Titus, who descended on Galilee from the north to face my ragtag army. Wise and prudent leadership would by now have recognized that the way to defeat Nero would not be on Israel's home turf, but on Rome's, by enlisting the 10th part of the empire's population, the many Jews scattered across its western lands and in the capital city itself, in support of our brethren in Jerusalem and Galilee. But the revolt's leaders were too busy quarreling with each other as the Roman legions poured into the land of Israel. I and a band of compatriots holed up in a cave in the Galilean city of Jotapata. All of us entered into a suicide pact, designating who would slit the throats of the next in line, as determined by drawing lots, until the last one left standing would fall on his own sword. As fate would have it, I was that last man, deciding instead to surrender to the Romans and predicting that Vespasian would soon become emperor himself. Vespasian, clearly pleased by this prognostication, spared me and subsequently employed me as his assistant during the remainder of the bloody conflict. From that day to the present, I would spend the rest of my life as an employee. Some would call me a lackey of the Romans, writing histories of my people and of the war, unfortunately being remembered as a notorious traitor to the Jewish people. Back in Jerusalem, lacking a dynamic leader and mired in internecine strife, the rebel cause went down in flames. The city was surrounded by Roman forces who hermetically sealed it and starved its captive population. On the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, in the year 70 of the Common Era, the temple, Herod's magnificent monument, was set fire and burned to the ground. It would take even more relentless combat before all the rebels were slaughtered, and another 2 years before the last zealot stronghold, Masada, commanded by the cousin of Menachem, Eliezer ben Yair, finally fell. This is the greatest tragedy in all of Jewish history, and will remain so up until the Nazi era and the Holocaust. But it will not spell the end of the story, either for Jews as people of the book or the spirit of liberty. One day in the far distant future, a new Jewish state will arise in Palestine. It will embody the myriad lessons, political and social, learned from the biblical saga, just as its new citizens will be born speaking the biblical tongue, Hebrew. The State of Israel, established by a UN vote in 1947, and yet another war of independence in 1948, is born as a parliamentary democracy. As Benjamin Franklin once quipped, a republic, if you can keep it.